Imagine if I said to you that behind the thrones, the banks, and even the European wars, there were families so powerful their names were uttered as much as they were whispered. Dynasties that pushed money, crowns, and empires around like pawns on a chessboard. Here in this video, we are lifting the veil on Europe's strongest secret dynasties. The Medici bankers who constructed the Renaissance, the Rothschilds who engineered the contemporary financial system, and the Habsburg royals whose bloodlines once spanned continents. They were not merely actors in history, they wrote it behind the scenes. But there's the catch. While their influence was immense, it was never total. Their reputations are saturated with secrets, rivalries, and myths that obfuscate fact and conspiracy. And after you view this video, you won't merely be hearing the stories, you will be discovering the truth behind the myths spoken for centuries. No more myths and incomplete stories, but you will at last discover the secrets, the power, and the realities which the world has kept hidden. If one were to make the assertion that secretive dynasties still rule over all of Europe, it would seem plausible on the surface. Who knows, after all, there have been enough families throughout history who created nations behind the scenes. However, the truth is far more nuanced. The notion that unseen dynasties are in control, pulling strings behind the scenes, is one of the greatest myths of history, consistently fueled by conspiracy theory. The focus of these tales remains the Rothschild family, which for centuries has been accused of masterminding global finance from behind the scenes. But whenever historians and experts probe further, they discover not a secret empire but rumor exaggerated by prejudice and not fact. This is not to say that power never existed. There were families such as the Rothschilds in banking, the Habsburgs in imperial politics, and the Bourbons in France who once commanded vast power. For centuries, they bankrolled monarchs, made decisions on war and peace, arranged royal marriages, and established empires that traversed continents. They were names that could alter the fortunes of nations. But no dynasty lasts forever. Their authority crumbled, their riches dissipated, and their domination fell prey to revolutions, democracy, and emerging new powers. All they left behind were magnificent palaces, dying legends, and tales 100-fold more intriguing than the legends themselves. Thus, though the dynasties of Europe were all too real and certainly powerful, the notion of some secret group quietly orchestrating global events is less reality than myth. It is a legend that has become greater than the truth itself. And if you believe dynasties are mere myths hidden in old books, then reconsider. Europe's history is not only inscribed in battles and treaties, but also in the birth of families so dominant their name rattled kingdoms. They were no common families. They were dynasties who shifted money, crowns, and empires like history itself yielded to their desires. Consider the Medici family. Emerging from Florence in the 15th century, they started out as bankers but ended up being much more than that. They were masters of power, employing wealth as their most potent weapon. It was not sufficient for them to fund kings. They created kings. With gold circulating in their accounts, the Medicis forged alliances, dominated Florence, and extended into the very center of the Vatican. They made their own members popes and helped royal courts throughout Europe. If influence were bought and sold, the Medicis were its biggest customers. Their name became synonymous with a truth that Europe learned all too well. Money does not merely build cities, it builds power. And thus, their shadow stretched far beyond Florence, determining the fate of nations. But power never stays in one place for long. By the 18th century, yet another dynasty started its web. The Rothschilds emerged from Frankfurt and established a banking dynasty that extended all over Europe. One brother in London, another in Paris, another in Vienna, each in control of a capital and together operating a network so big that governments themselves were beholden to them. They funded wars, rebuilt economies, and controlled the purse strings of monarchs. To most, it appeared as if they were phantom rulers of finance, manipulating gold and loans like pawns on a board. But though their power was great, the myths grew greater. Rumor made them mysterious masters of Europe. Stories equated them with controlling kings in the background. But the reality, as historians would caution us, is much more subtle. Their power was real, but it was never absolute, and much of what is believed today belongs more to myth than fact. And then there were the royal dynasties, the Habsburgs and the Bourbons. These were not just families, they were empires carved into bloodlines. The Habsburgs spread their influence across Austria, Spain, and beyond, often without lifting a sword. Instead, they mastered the art of marriage. Let others fight war, their slogan announced, "You lucky Austria wed." And wed they did. Their weddings reshaped the very face of Europe. The Bourbons, meanwhile, ruled France and Spain, their crowns bearing glory and tragedy. For centuries, it appeared that no throne could remain secure without their goodwill. But even imperial overlordship has its limitations. Revolutions, wars, and the emergence of democracy broke their grip and left behind remnants of erstwhile great empires. So if you picture dynasties as untouchable forces manipulating things behind the scenes, history reveals a less simplistic truth. They were dominant, yes, but never invincible. Their rule was tenuous, their power challenged, and their legacies sensational. And it is in these tales of riches, ambition, triumph, and collapse that we find facts far more interesting than the myths hinted at in the dark corners. Coming on to possibly the most controversial and discussed dynasty in history, we reach the Rothschilds, a family whose very name arouses both wonder and suspicion. If there is ever a family blamed for controlling the world behind the scenes, it would be them. They started with a phenomenal ascent in the 18th and 19th centuries. There, they constructed a banking dynasty, the likes of which the world had never known. Each brother was strategically positioned in a separate European capital, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, spreading an umbrella under which they could channel money faster than armies can be moved by kings. They funded wars, propped up governments, and even let the British government buy shares in the Suez Canal Company, a transaction that redistributed the power of world trade. If any clan appeared to possess the keys to states, it was the Rothschilds. But power tends to be suspicious. If a dynasty funded monarchs and bankrolled wars, then people started wondering what else they dominated. With time, whispers turned to rumors and rumors to legends. Before long, there was the myth that the Rothschilds were not only rich, but also clandestine masters of world finance, determining the destiny of nations behind the scenes. And yet this is where the tale turns. Their impact was undeniable, their fortune gigantic, and their place in history irrefutable. But the assertion that they controlled the world stealthily is a myth, not a fact. Historians and scholars have demonstrated that these concepts are based not on fact, but on anti-Semitism and prejudice. So the conspiracy says more about fear and man's need for scapegoats than it does about the Rothschild family itself. Yet the legend would not perish. Even in the 21st century, the notion of the Rothschilds being puppet masters remains spread in forums, books, and viral posts. Were one to come across these tales out of context, one would be left believing that there must be such shadow rulers. But when you take away the layers, what you are left with is not a shadow government, but a dominant family whose true history has been blown up into legend. So the Rothschild conspiracy theory is still one of the most well-known instances of influence being perverted into legend. They were bankers who shaped the course of history and dynasts who marked nations. But their real legacy has been overrun by rumors of control that say more about human imagination than about the Rothschilds themselves. And now we enter the last chapter of this tale, where the ancient dynasties disappear and new instruments of power emerge to replace them. If heretofore the world was dominated by a few families whose names reverberated through royal halls and banking rooms, then now the stage is much more populous and the terms are different. Picture Europe of the centuries ago. The Medicis purchased power with money. The Rothschilds linked capitals with their banking network. The Habsburgs consolidated kingdoms with marriages that redrew the very map of the continent. They appeared invincible for generations. But history does not curve endlessly to the desire of a single family. Revolutions shook monarchies, collapsed, and new economic powers started to surface. Thus, dynasties that had appeared immortal started losing control over power. If you searched for their contemporary equivalents, you would not find them sitting on thrones or ruling from darkened palaces. Instead, power now has seeped into networks of corporations, institutions, and individuals. It no longer resides in one house, but seeps across boardrooms, trading floors, and even the screens of tech titans. Influence has become more diffuse and multifarious, a net too wide for any one dynasty to dominate. But the desire for secret masters never went away. Conspiracy theories still adhere to the notion of one family running it all, whispering about clandestine gatherings and unseen manipulation. But the truth is otherwise. Families such as Sweden's Wallenbergs keep influencing banking and technology. The Arnauts of France own the luxury industry by controlling LVMH, defining how the world perceives wealth and refinement. Their power is wide, but it is not masked in obscurity. It is made visible, transparent, and is subject to ongoing examination. Thus, the saga of dynasties is not one of disappearing into thin air, but of evolution. The old palaces remain as a testament to what was. The family names continue to ring with a certain legend. Some descendants continue to possess riches and status, but they are no longer the unseen chess masters of history. If they still shape the world, it is as a cog in a greater machine and not as clandestine rulers over it. And this fact makes the story more interesting. Because the erosion of dynastic privilege did not finish the tale of power. It changed it. What lay previously in the authority of bankers and kings now radiates throughout governments, corporations and billionaires whose influence extends across continents. The past dynasties serve to remind us about how powerful families can control the course of history. But the current serves to remind us that no family, however legendary, can possess the world indefinitely. And as we depart the gilded halls of Europe's secret dynasties, we enter a new age where power is not concealed but multiplied, where secrets remain but are no longer the property of one name. And if history has taught us anything, it is this. Dynasties will rise and fall, but the pursuit of power will always have new successors. And so we leave the page on Europe's secret dynasties. From the gold builders who created empires, to the royals who sewed countries together with crowns and weddings, their shadows still cling over history. They are evidence that power is never lost. It does not disappear, it merely changes, it evolves, and it comes back again as fresh forms and new characters. What was once penned in bloodlines and royal signatures is now carved into corporations, institutions, and fortunes that dominate our world today. But the true mystery is for you to solve. Do you think the era of dynasties is really over? Or might there still be families working quietly behind the scenes, shaping our world today in ways we don't yet perceive? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion. If this trip through secrets and power captivated you, don't forget to click that like button, subscribe for more narratives that really get into the backstories of history, and ring the bell so you never miss what's next. Share this video with friends who enjoy a good mystery, and let's keep discovering the truth together.